Friends, let me ask you something before I say another word. Look down at your arms. Look down at your legs. Now ask yourself honestly, are they as strong as they were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even 1 year ago? If you hesitated for even a second before answering, then what I'm about to share with you in the next few minutes could change the way you eat breakfast for the rest of your life. I've spent decades in clinics, sitting across from patients just like you, people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, who came to me complaining about the same thing. Doctor, I don't feel as strong as I used to. Doctor, climbing the stairs feels harder. Doctor, I dropped a jar of pickles last week because my grip just gave out. And every single time, I would ask them the same question. What did you eat for breakfast this morning? And almost every single time, the answer would be some version of toast, cereal, or coffee and nothing else. And that, my friends, is where the problem begins. Here's something most people don't know, and it took me years of studying the research and watching my own patients to fully understand it. After the age of 60, your body enters a completely different phase of life when it comes to muscle. Scientists call it sarcopenia. It's a fancy word, but let me put it simply for you. It means your body starts losing muscle mass naturally, year after year, whether you like it or not. Some studies suggest we can lose as much as 3 to 8% of our muscle mass per decade after 30, and that rate accelerates significantly after 60. By the time many people reach their 70s, they may have lost a third of the muscle strength they once had in their prime. And this isn't just about looking strong or being able to lift heavy things at the gym. This is about your ability to get up from a chair without struggling. This is about your ability to carry your groceries. This is about your ability to catch yourself if you trip, instead of falling and breaking a hip. Muscle, my friends, is not vanity. Muscle is survival. Now here's the good news, and this is the part I want you to really listen to, because this is why I'm standing here talking to you today. Muscle loss is not entirely inevitable. It is not some unstoppable force of nature that you simply have to accept and surrender to. There is real, solid, peer-reviewed science that shows us that with the right nutrition, especially at breakfast, when your body has been fasting all night and is desperately searching for building blocks, you can slow this decline, and in many cases, you can even reverse it. And it often comes down to one thing that most people completely overlook: protein. Not just any protein, the right kind, the right amount, at the right time of day. And there is one breakfast food in particular that, when I explain the science behind it, I think you're going to want to start eating tomorrow morning. Let's talk about eggs. I know. Some of you just felt a little twinge of doubt. Maybe someone told you eggs are bad for your cholesterol. Maybe you've been avoiding the yolk for 30 years because of advice that, frankly, has been walked back by modern research. I want you to set that old fear aside for just a few minutes, because what I'm about to share with you is going to reframe the way you think about this humble, inexpensive, easy-to-prepare food. Eggs are what we call a complete protein. That means they contain all 9 essential amino acids that your body cannot produce on its own. Amino acids you must get from food. But it's not just that eggs have protein. It's the quality and the composition of that protein that makes them so special, particularly for people over 60 who are fighting against muscle loss. There is one amino acid in particular that plays a starring role in this story, and its name is leucine. Leucine is often called the trigger amino acid because it is one of the primary signals your body uses to kickstart something called muscle protein synthesis. Think of muscle protein synthesis as your body's repair crew. Every single day, your muscle fibers experience tiny amounts of wear and tear, whether from walking, from gardening, from simply moving through your day, in order to repair that wear and tear. And to build new muscle tissue on top of it, your body needs a strong enough signal to say, okay, it's time to build. Leucine is one of the loudest, clearest signals we know of. And research has shown that as we age, our muscles become less sensitive to these signals. Scientists call this anabolic resistance. It basically means that a dose of protein that would have triggered muscle building in your 30s might not be enough to trigger the same response in your 60s or 70s. You need more of it, and you need it to be higher quality to get the same effect. This is one of the hidden reasons so many older adults lose muscle, even when they think they're eating reasonably well. And this is exactly why eggs stand out, because eggs are naturally dense in leucine relative to their calorie and protein content, and because the protein in eggs has what's called a high biological value, meaning your body can actually absorb and use nearly all of it, unlike some plant-based proteins where a portion passes through undigested or underutilized. 2 large eggs give you around 12 to 14 grams of high-quality, complete protein along with a meaningful dose of leucine, all wrapped up in roughly 140 calories. That is an extraordinarily efficient package for someone who is trying to preserve or build muscle without piling on excess calories. But friends, the story doesn't stop at protein and leucine. Eggs bring along a whole supporting cast of nutrients that work together with that protein to protect your muscles as you age, and I want to walk you through each one because understanding the why behind advice is what makes people actually stick with it. Let's talk about vitamin D now. I want you to think back to the last time your doctor checked your vitamin D levels. If you're like most of my patients over 60, there's a good chance your levels were on the lower side, especially if you don't spend much time in direct sunlight, if you live somewhere with long winters, or if you simply spend more time indoors these days than you used to. Vitamin D isn't just about bone health, although that's incredibly important too, especially for preventing fractures. Vitamin D also plays a very real role in muscle function. There are vitamin D receptors located directly in muscle tissue. When vitamin D levels are low, studies have linked this to reduced muscle strength, slower reaction times, and a higher risk of falls in older adults. Egg yolks are one of the very few natural food sources of vitamin D, and while they won't single-handedly solve a serious deficiency, they contribute a meaningful, natural amount to your daily intake, working quietly in the background to support the very muscles we're trying to protect. Then there's choline. This is a nutrient that almost nobody talks about at the dinner table, but it deserves your attention. Choline plays an important role in supporting healthy nerve function, and here's why that matters so much for muscle strength. Your muscles don't just decide to contract on their own. They receive signals from your nervous system through what's called the neuromuscular junction, telling them exactly when and how to fire. As we age, this communication pathway can become less efficient, which contributes to slower, weaker muscle contractions, even in muscle tissue that hasn't necessarily shrunk. Egg yolks happen to be one of the richest natural dietary sources of choline available to us. It's not a flashy nutrient, but it's a quiet, essential piece of the puzzle for keeping the connection between your brain and your muscles as sharp and responsive as possible. And I want to mention one more piece, because this is something I find genuinely fascinating from a scientific standpoint. Eggs contain a good supply of selenium and B vitamins, particularly B12, which many older adults struggle to absorb properly due to changes in stomach acid production that come with age. B12 deficiency has been linked in research to fatigue weakness, and yes, muscle and nerve issues. Selenium acts as an antioxidant that helps protect muscle cells from the kind of oxidative stress that accumulates over the decades and contributes to tissue breakdown. So when you sit down to a plate with eggs on it, you are not simply eating protein. You are delivering a coordinated package of nutrients that support the entire chain of events required for strong, functional muscles. From the nervous system signal, to the muscle fiber itself, to the repair and rebuilding process that happens afterward. Now let me tell you about a patient of mine. I'll call her Margaret, because that's not her real name, but her story is real, and I've seen versions of it play out again and again in my career. Margaret came to see me in her late 60s. She had always been an active woman, she told me, tending her garden, walking her dog every morning, carrying her own suitcases when she traveled to visit her grandchildren. But over the previous 2 years, she noticed something troubling. Getting up out of a low chair had become a genuine effort. She had started using both hands to push herself up off the couch. She'd stopped carrying her own suitcase because it felt too heavy, something that would have been effortless for her just a few years earlier. She came to me worried, and honestly, a little frightened, because she had watched her own mother decline in a very similar way in her 70s, eventually needing a walker, and Margaret did not want that future for herself. We talked about her diet, and just like so many of my patients, Her breakfast consisted of a piece of toast with jam and a cup of coffee. That was it. No protein whatsoever until lunchtime, sometimes not until dinner. I explained to her what I'm explaining to you right now. That her muscles were essentially starving for the raw materials and the signals they needed first thing in the morning, at exactly the time when her body, after a long overnight fast, was most primed to use that protein efficiently. We made one change. Just one. She started eating 2 to 3 eggs most mornings, sometimes scrambled, sometimes as an omelette with some vegetables mixed in, occasionally boiled when she was in a hurry. We didn't overhaul her entire life. We didn't put her on some extreme diet. We simply added this one powerful food to her breakfast, consistently, most days of the week. Within about 10 to 12 weeks, Margaret came back for a follow-up, and she was genuinely emotional when she told me that she had gotten up off her living room floor after gardening, something she did to weed near the ground, without needing to use her hands to push herself up. She said it was the first time in over a year that had happened, and it nearly brought her to tears in my office. Now, I want to be careful here, because I am not telling you that eggs are magic, and I am not telling you this happens for everyone in exactly 10 weeks. Individual results vary, and consistency, along with movement and activity, always matters alongside nutrition. But what Margaret's story illustrates, and what the science backs up, is that this simple, affordable, accessible food, added consistently to breakfast, can be a genuine turning point for people who are watching their strength slowly slip away. Let's go a little deeper into the science of timing, because I think this is a piece of the puzzle that changes everything once you understand it. There's a concept in muscle research called the protein distribution theory. Essentially, researchers have found that spreading your protein intake evenly across the day, rather than loading it all into one big dinner, which is the pattern so many of us fall into, appears to be more effective for stimulating muscle protein synthesis throughout the day. Most people I see in my practice eat very little protein at breakfast, a moderate amount at lunch, and then a large, protein-heavy dinner, often with a big piece of meat or fish. That pattern leaves a massive gap in the morning, sometimes 12, 14, 16 hours since the last real dose of protein, during which your body has very little raw material available to repair and build muscle tissue. Adding a solid source of complete protein at breakfast, and eggs are one of the most efficient, practical ways to do this, helps close that gap and gives your body a chance to trigger muscle protein synthesis first thing in the day, rather than leaving your muscles waiting for hours. I also want to address something that I know is on many of your minds, because I hear it constantly in my practice. The cholesterol question. For decades, many of us were told to avoid eggs, or at the very least to avoid egg yolks, because of concerns about dietary cholesterol raising blood cholesterol levels and increasing heart disease risk. This advice shaped an entire generation's breakfast habits, myself included, at various points in my career. But the science on this has evolved substantially, and major nutritional bodies have shifted their guidance in recent years. Current research suggests that for most healthy individuals, dietary cholesterol from foods like eggs has a much smaller impact on blood cholesterol levels than we once believed, and that the primary drivers of unhealthy cholesterol profiles tend to be saturated fat intake, excess sugar, and overall dietary patterns rather than eggs specifically. Now, I always tell my patients, and I'll tell you the same thing, if you have a specific heart condition, a diagnosed lipid disorder, or your own physician has given you individual guidance to limit eggs for a particular medical reason, please continue to follow your own doctor's personalized advice, because your situation may be unique. But for the general population of adults over 60 who do not have a specific contraindication, moderate egg consumption, several eggs per week, and for many people, even up to 1 egg a day or more, has increasingly been shown to fit comfortably within a heart-healthy dietary pattern, especially when eggs replace less nutritious breakfast choices like sugary cereals or refined pastries. Now let's talk practically, because I don't just want to give you the science. I want to give you something you can actually use starting tomorrow morning. How should you actually incorporate this into your life? First, aim for consistency over perfection. You do not need to eat eggs every single day for the rest of your life for this to matter. What matters far more is building a habit, most mornings of the week, where your breakfast includes a real, substantial source of protein rather than just carbohydrates alone. 2 to 3 eggs is a very reasonable target for most people, providing somewhere around 15 to 20 grams of high-quality protein, which research suggests is closer to the threshold needed to meaningfully stimulate muscle protein synthesis in older adults, compared to the smaller 10-gram doses that might have been sufficient in your younger years. Second, prepare them in a way that works with your life. Scrambled eggs take barely 5 minutes. Boiled eggs can be prepared in batches at the start of the week and kept in the refrigerator, ready to grab in seconds on busy mornings. An omelette with some spinach, tomatoes, or mushrooms folded in adds fiber, additional vitamins, and volume without much additional time in the kitchen. There is no single correct way to prepare them. The key is simply making sure they show up on your plate regularly. Third, think about pairing. Eggs alone are wonderful, but pairing them with a slice of whole grain toast, some avocado, or a side of fruit rounds out the meal with fiber and micronutrients, supporting not just your muscles, but your digestion, your energy levels, and your overall satisfaction with the meal, which matters enormously for long-term consistency. After all, the best nutrition plan in the world means nothing if it isn't enjoyable enough to stick with. Fourth, and this is something I really want to emphasize because nutrition alone is only half of the equation. Muscle needs a reason to grow, and that reason comes from movement. Even simple activities, walking, light resistance exercises with bands or body weight, standing up and sitting down from a chair repeatedly, carrying grocery bags, send a signal to your body that says, these muscles are being used, and they need to be maintained and strengthened. When you combine that movement signal with the nutritional building blocks from a protein-rich breakfast like eggs, you create a far more powerful effect than either one alone. I've seen this again and again in my practice. Patients who add both a little bit of regular movement and a solid protein breakfast see far more meaningful improvements in strength and function than those who focus on only one piece of the puzzle. I also want to speak for a moment to those of you who might be thinking, Doctor, I've heard eggs mentioned before. This doesn't feel like groundbreaking news to me. And I understand that reaction completely. But here is what I've observed after decades of clinical practice. Knowing a piece of information and actually applying it consistently in your daily life are two very different things. Most people have heard, in some vague way, that eggs are healthy or that protein matters. But very few people understand the specific mechanism of why timing matters, why the leucine content specifically matters for triggering muscle repair, why the vitamin D and choline content work together with the protein to support the nervous system and muscle function simultaneously, and why this particular combination becomes so much more important after the age of 60 than it was in earlier decades of life. Understanding the why is what transforms vague advice into a habit you'll actually maintain for years, because you understand exactly what you're protecting every time you crack open that shell. Let me also gently address a concern I hear from some of my patients who follow plant-based diets, or who have an egg allergy or sensitivity. I want to be clear that while eggs are an exceptionally efficient and convenient package for this purpose, they are not the only path to supporting muscle health. Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, fish, poultry, and for those following plant-based patterns, combinations of legumes with grains, along with fortified plant proteins, can also contribute meaningfully to your protein needs, though you may need larger portions or more thoughtful combining to reach a similar leucine threshold. I share this not to distract from today's main message, but because I care about every single one of you watching, and I want you to know that if eggs genuinely don't work for your body or your dietary choices, the underlying principle, a substantial, complete protein source at breakfast, most days of the week, is what truly matters most, and there are other paths to get there. I want to circle back to something I said at the very beginning, because I think it's worth repeating with everything we've now discussed. Muscle is not vanity. I've watched too many patients over the years lose their independence, not because of one dramatic illness, but because of a slow, quiet erosion of strength that crept up on them 1 year at a time, until one day they couldn't get off the floor after a fall, or they couldn't carry their own bags up a flight of stairs, or they became afraid to walk on uneven ground because they no longer trusted their own legs to catch them. And I've also watched, with real joy, patients like Margaret who made one simple, sustainable change to their breakfast and gained back a level of confidence and physical capability that let them keep gardening, keep traveling, keep playing with their grandchildren on the floor without fear. This is why I get genuinely passionate when I talk about this topic, because it isn't abstract to me. It's the difference between an 80-year-old patient who can still travel independently and one who becomes dependent on others for basic daily tasks. And so much of that difference comes down to decisions we make every single day at the breakfast table, decisions that feel small in the moment but compound, quietly, powerfully over months and years. So here is what I want to leave you with today. Tomorrow morning, when you wake up, I want you to think about what you're about to put on your plate. Instead of reaching automatically for the same toast, the same cereal, the same routine you've followed for years without much thought, I want you to consider adding 2 or 3 eggs to that breakfast. Give your body the complete protein, the leucine, the vitamin D, the choline, all working together to send a clear, strong signal to your muscles that says, we are still needed, we are still valued, and we are going to keep you strong. Do this consistently, most mornings. Pair it with even a little bit of movement throughout your day, and give your body several weeks to respond, because meaningful physiological change, while real, does take time and consistency to show up in a way you can feel. I know there's a lot of noise out there in the world of health advice. New supplements promising miracles, extreme diets promising overnight transformations, conflicting headlines that change every few years. What I've tried to share with you today isn't a miracle, and it isn't a gimmick. It's simply a return to something simple, something affordable, something that's been sitting in your refrigerator all along, understood now through the lens of real, solid nutritional science, specifically applied to the unique needs of your body after 60. If today's message resonated with you, if you learned something you didn't know before about your own body and how to protect your strength as you age, I want to ask you for 2 small favors. First, please hit that subscribe button because I share information like this regularly, and I would genuinely love to have you as part of this community, learning together, one honest conversation at a time. And second, please leave a comment down below. Tell me your age, tell me what your breakfast usually looks like, tell me if you're planning to try adding eggs to your morning routine starting tomorrow, or if you've already been doing this and have felt the difference yourself. I read every single comment, and there is nothing that motivates me more than hearing from you directly about how this information is actually making a difference in your daily life. Take care of yourselves, take care of your strength, because your strength today is your independence tomorrow. I'll see you in the next one.